What's going on, everybody? Today we are going to learn how to better visualize our animations using Autodesk Maya. So where we're going to start is with a few basic techniques to help you better visualize your curves and your arcs in the Maya program. Now in other programs such as Adobe Flash, you will be able to see onion skin. Also in Adobe After Effects, you may be able to see specific spacing of your keyframes. Well, in Maya, when we go to animate from first appearances, we don't see that. So I'm going to go and create a ball right now, hit W on my keyboard, and I'm going to just do a basic animation side to side. So let's actually do two spheres here. And I'm going to start by making sure that my playback speed is set to real time. And I'm going to give myself roughly, if I have 24 frames a second, 48, let's go up to, let's do 120. 120 frames is fine. And we're going to take 120 frames and we're going to set two keys. So I'm going to hold Shift W on these to set my translate key. So that's the Shift key and W. You'll see it just sets the translates. And I'm going to take them and make sure auto keyframing is turned on and translate them to the other end, and we have our first animation. Now, when we play this back, what you can see is, well, not much. You can see the movement of the items, but you don't really see the spacing. Now, most of us understand the graph editor, and the graph editor is a really great tool to help visualize spacing. But it's very hard to visualize spacing when you're simply looking at a curve. So if I sat here and adjusted this curve, let's go ahead and grab the curve, and I'm going to go ahead and break my tangents and make sure that I'm set to the weighted node. And I'm going to adjust my graph. Let's go ahead and just give it a nice arc. That looks about nice. This is going to change the spacing. Now, our timing is still 120 frame animation, but as you can see, the spacing is drastically different. It actually appears like the ball at the bottom wins the race, when in fact they both win the race at the same time. So what are some ways that we can visualize this spacing? Well, Maya has given us a few options. There's actually a whole tab or a submenu dedicated to visualization. Here we can do things such as create motion trails, which we'll discuss later on, and ghost animations as well. So let's get started here with ghosting. Now ghosting is really interesting because if we go ahead and highlight our object that has been keyframed and hit ghost selected, what you're going to end up seeing is actually quite interesting. You actually see onion skinning of the animation. And this is a really great attribute to kind of allow the animator to kind of see where they're going with it. Now if we go to unghost selected, you'll see it goes away. Now, we have options in the ghosted selection. Currently here you can see I can set the steps before, I can set the steps behind, I can do global preferences, I can set to keyframes, I can set frame 1 to 120 in this case from the start to end, and we can hit ghost and you can see the major keyframe points. So you can see basically your extremes. In this case we only had 2, so it's not exactly a bad thing. Make sure I select the ball there when I delete it on ghost. I'm going to go back to ghost selected in the option box and play around with a few more options. Again, custom frame steps, all of which can give us a very, very good idea of what we're looking at. So if we only want to see specific extremes, frame 1, 10, and 20 in this case, we can type those in. What I tend to like to do is kind of experiment with a few of these. You can see sometimes it's a little too tight of a ghost to play with. So what I really like to do is kind of open that up into the frames. And so if I want to show 120 and if I know I have 120 there, so I can put up to, let's say, 90 frames. Let's go, looks like it will go only higher to 20, so we'll do 20 before and 20 after, and I'll go ahead and hit enter. Now I can kind of see this spacing. You can see the spacing is opening up here when it becomes faster, and it's actually tighter here when it's not. And this is a really great tool to kind of figure out your timing and spacing beyond just the simple graph editor. Now, it does not replace the graph editor, but it really helps out. Another really great tool, and we'll just open up a new scene here, is if you're trying to learn how to do a ball bounce. And one of the greatest tools, I think, in the Visualize tab is the Create Editable Motion Trails. So I'm going to go ahead and create a sphere once again. And on this sphere, I'm going to just start the process of a simple ball bounce. I'm going to hit Shift-W to set a keyframe. And I'm going to go up, and I'm not going to worry too much about timing, but I'll set that to 0. Hit Shift-W again to make sure they're all connected. And I'm actually going to move that out a little bit so we have a little diagonal. So that ball is going to hit there. Maybe on frame 20 it will land here. Maybe on frame 17 or 18 or so it will be in the air again. And we'll make sure that we translate it back down. So we have a nice little bounce going. You can see right there. That's really good. And we'll go out a little bit more, just a tad. We'll split the difference, and we'll make sure that the ball is in the air. So what we have is a nice 2 bounce step. I may add just a 3rd bounce just to kind of round it off here. There we go, and make sure my keyframe ends on 0 so it's always on the ground. So currently we have this. It's all right. You know, we have the ball hitting the ground, hitting the ground, hitting the ground, hitting the ground. Now, we were to go to our graph editor, we would see, especially in the translate, that we currently don't have very good spacing. We have linear spacing set up. What I'd have to do is, again, make sure I free my tangent weight and open up my curves. And I could start setting the weight for this ball, and that's exactly what I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to set the weight for the ball, and I'm going to pull this down so it kind of drops a little more extreme. I'm going to use some plateau tangents here just to give me a good idea of kind of what's going on. And I'm also going to arc this. Now, this keyframe looks like it could be moved over a little bit. We may have to address that later on. So we'll zoom out here. Again, we'll plateau tangent here, and definitely need to move this keyframe in because that's a pretty big extreme. We'll plateau tangent there. So let's see what we have. Now, in other programs like Flash, as I mentioned, you could see the spacing. So looking at this, and let me just cut this down to maybe 35 frames to speed back to playback. We don't get much results in the sense of, unless you can visualize that arc without seeing it, we don't get much results in what's going on with our curves. This is where the Visualize tab comes in handy. If I go ahead and go to Visualize, select the keyframed item, and say Create Editable Motion Trail, what you'll see is actually the curves. And this is a really great item, especially if you look at your side view in this case, where you can start adjusting these main curve points. And these curve points are obviously our keyframes. So you can see, for instance, if I want to maybe stretch that curve out a little bit now, I can do that. Boom. Very cool. Or if I want to maybe extend that last frame a little bit so it's a little wider, I can do that as well. Again, this does not replace your graph editor, but what you can do is when you start resetting keyframes. So for instance, if let's say I set a keyframe currently right there, it will mess up my curve, and I'm going to go pull it up a little bit, and maybe I want to hold that ball just slightly more. Now what I can do is go back to my graph editor and just adjust it, and it will automatically update. So you can see, yes, we have a lot of work to do on this curve, but in the long and short of things, it's really not that much work. So you can see I can just adjust it a little more. I can pull that curve in. And again, it's an experiment of sorts, but let's see what we get now. Yeah, a little bit better. So again, if I want to nudge that in and tighten that curve up, I can do so. If I want to grab all of these curves and pull them in, I can also do that. and this will give it again a really nice heavy looking bounce as we go forward. So this is a really great tool to visualize your animations. Now, if you're having trouble dealing with arcs and creating more organic animations, Maya does offer other tools that help kind of constrain your animation to an item. Let's go ahead and create a new scene, and I'm going to hit, don't save there because I don't need to save that. And let's create a cylinder of sorts here, and we're going to create this cylinder as just a proxy or a placeholder object. And I'm going to go ahead and go into the top view and zoom out here and use my curve tool. So create curves, and you can use any one you'd like. I'm going to start with the top, CV curve tool. Let me turn my wireframe on shaded so you guys can see. And what I'm going to do is use my left mouse button and draw a path for this animation. And what we're going to create is a motion path. So what we want to do is attach this cylinder right here to this curve right here. And it's actually very easy. What you won't do is you really won't be able to find it in the Visualize tab, because though it is visualizing some animation for us, it is actually constraining the object, you can see right here under motion paths, to the path itself. So if I select the object and I grab the motion path and I do attach to motion path, what you'll notice is we get this cycle. Now, it's currently set to 120. By default, it sticks to the amount of keyframes that you have. This by no means will hurt your animation. Again, if we have the keyframes and we want to move them, we can always go into our graph editor and adjust those per our liking. So again, if I hit focus here, you can see that's 120. If I don't want it to be 120, I can simply move it in and maybe put it to like 72, and it will, even though it does not update, it will complete in 72 frames. So just kind of ignore that number, so to speak, there. What we can also do is a lot of special things in the attribute editor itself under the motion path tab. We can set things up to set our world type. We can set the length of the tab. We can invert our objects. We can even set the front axis, what is up, what is down, what is rotated, and so forth. So if we want that to assembly, maybe follow like a log, one of those log jammer rides at the amusement parks, we can do so. And just using these items in the attribute editor here. So again, those are 3 different ways that you can easily animate along curves to create organic animation, but also help visualize your animation tools. I'll catch you next time, guys, and hope you have a good day.